Here are the facts. The latest Treasury estimate is that to eliminate the deficit requires a further £25 billion of permanent public expenditure savings or new taxes.
We have to get debt down as a percentage of GDP, and there's a very hard way of doing it, which is running a budget surplus every year and paying off the cash debt. And there's a much easier way of doing it, which is get the economy growing faster with higher trend productivity growth so that the denominator increases. And that is the smart way to shrink our debt as a proportion of our GDP. Grow the GDP, strong real wage growth, rising living standards.
Poverty is really a major challenge in the United Kingdom, and that not nearly enough is currently being done to address the challenges. On the other side, what I found in my discussions with ministers is basically a state of denial.
You say that you didn't think the cuts were that bad. I mean, really? Not that bad?
No, I think, look, the cuts were very difficult to make, and there were lots of very difficult decisions, and I'm not sure we got all of them right, but I've never wavered in the belief that it was necessary to make difficult decisions.
You cut more
I think
fast.
Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for sight of her statement today. Today's figures are truly shocking. They highlight the devastating impact of austerity on families across the country. It is a national scandal that 14 million people, including 4.1 million children, are living in poverty in one of the richest countries in the world. Yet this statement today is marked by complacency and denial. We know that as universal credit has rolled out across the country, we have witnessed a sharp increase in food bank use. We are one of the richest countries in the world, and this is a source of national shame. We are seeing families unable to feed their children. As a former school teacher, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you I know what it's like when children are hungry and in school. They cannot learn, they're unhappy, they're worried, and they don't want their parents to know how worried they are. This is a scandal that has to be addressed. Yet, in the face of this human misery, we hear the Secretary of State attempt to justify austerity and this government's clear political decision to balance the books on the back of the poor and disabled. This is a disgrace. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation estimates that continuing the benefits freeze for a fourth year will mean that families will be on average £560 worse off as a result. The Secretary of State said on the 10th of January that the freeze was the right policy at the time. If it isn't the right policy now, why is it being continued until April 2020? And why was there nothing in this statement to address this? The government has in the past responded to our criticism of the rises in relative poverty by saying that it's absolute poverty that matters. Well, we all know that we have to look at all measures of poverty. So what is the Secretary of State's response then to her department's figures today showing that the number of children living in absolute poverty before housing costs has increased by 300,000 and after housing costs by 200,000 in 2017-18? And it is truly shocking that the number of people in absolute poverty before housing costs increased by 600,000 in that year. Evidence of the crisis in poverty in our country is clear. Yet last year, the Secretary of State criticised what she said was the political nature of the report by the UN Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights when he delivered his report last November.
what I saw, food banks, schools, community centres, job centres, libraries and elsewhere, is a lot of misery. A lot of people who feel that the system is failing them, a lot of people who feel that the system is really there just to punish them.
After months of no income, I was nearly £5,000 in debt and facing eviction from the hostel. I was in no fit state to work. For a while I tried, but I didn't have any proper clothes or even enough money to buy shampoo. I couldn't go to work in that state. The sexual assault had triggered severe PTSD and made my underlying mental health condition worse. I was regularly self-harming. I was disorientated and stressed because of the trauma and made multiple suicide attempts. I started selling all my possessions, textbooks, my laptop, my grandmother's jewellery, but it still wasn't enough. So eventually I visited an online forum and responded to adverts posted by men who were using coded terms such as older man seeking relationship with young woman for mutual gain. It was obvious what that meant.
Damien O'Reilly, Greater Manchester Police. Home Secretary, you'll remember in November 2010 you presented me with Community Police Officer of the Year award. I say that conference, forgive me, just to show that I do know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, I had worked in inner city Manchester for 15 years. I felt passionate about what I was doing. In 2012, I had to leave. I couldn't take it anymore because the changes that have been imposed have caused community policing to collapse. That's the reality, ma'am. Intelligence has dried up. There aren't local officers. They don't know what's happening. They're all reactive. There's no proactive policing locally. That is the reality, ma'am. And Mark Rowley just mentioned neighbourhood policing was critical to dealing with terrorism. We run the risk here of letting communities down, putting officers at risk and ultimately risking national security. I'd ask you to seriously reconsider the budget and the level of cuts over the next 5 years.
On June the 23rd, we all face a historic choice: to remain locked in a European Union ruled by an unelected elite, frankly indifferent to the suffering that their policies are causing.
So to eliminate the deficit and finish the job, we will reduce Whitehall spending by at least the same rate for the first 2 years of the next Parliament as we have done through this Parliament. And there will have to be less welfare spending too. Now,
or to take back control. Take back control of huge sums of money, £350 million a week, and spend it on our priorities, such as the NHS. If we vote leave on June the 23rd, we can take back control of £350 million a week.
That one of the central planks of the Leave campaign, that the EU money would go to the NHS, is clearly complete bokum. It's not going to happen.
On this figure, £350 million for a week, firstly, it's disputed by pretty much anybody on the amount.
Actually,
and secondly, the morning after the referendum...
I'm sorry to say, it is not disputed.
It is.
It is not.
Nigel, well, we can sit here and say it is and it isn't.
All right.
The £350 million a week we send to the EU, which we will no longer send to the EU, can you guarantee that's going to go to the NHS?
No, I can't, and I would never have made that claim.
17 million people have voted for Leave.
Yep.
Based, I don't know how many people voted on the basis of that advert, but that was a huge part of the propaganda.
And without an election, I don't want an election, you don't want an election. The Leader of the Opposition has been begging for an election for 2 years. He has crowds of supporters outside calling for an election. I don't want an election. In my view, and the view of this government, there must now be an election on Tuesday, the 15th of October. In my view, and the view of this government, there must now be an election on Tuesday, the 15th of October.
The Times let you go after you made up a quote. Why did you make up a quote?
Well, this again, you know, these are big terms for what happened. Well, I can tell you the whole thing. I mean, I think you sure our viewers wouldn't want to hear more about housing.
If you don't want to talk about the made-up quote,
it was a long and lamentable story.
Okay, but you made a quote up.
Well, what happened was that I ascribed events that were supposed to have taken place before the death of Piers Gaveston to events that actually took place after the death.
You made something up. Let me ask you about another little.
I mean, I mildly sandpapered something.
Let me ask you about a barefaced lie.
Very embarrassing. I'm very sorry about it.
Let me ask you about a barefaced lie. When you were in Michael Howard's team, you denied to him you were having an affair. It turned out you were, and he sacked you for that. Why did you lie to your party?
Well, I mean, again, with great respect, on that, I never had any conversation with Michael Howard about that matter, and I don't.
You did
propose. Well, I don't propose to go into all that again.
I don't blame you.
No, well, why should I? I mean, I've been through that question a lot with the. Watch the documentary.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about something else?
The programme also includes. Well, this is about your integrity.
Okay.
The programme includes your reaction as you listen to a phone call in which your friend Darius Guppy asks you to supply the address of a journalist so that he can have him physically assaulted. The words beaten up and broken ribs are said to you. And you, having heard that, you tell your friend Darius Guppy you will supply the address. What does that say about you, Boris Johnson? Well, aren't you, in fact, making up quotes, lying to your party leader, wanting to be part of someone being physically assaulted. You're a nasty piece of work, aren't you?
Well, Eddie, I think all three things I would dispute.
Well, you don't factually dispute them.
So finally, did you lie to the Queen when you advised her to prorogue to suspend Parliament?
Absolutely not. And indeed, as I say, that
the Prime Minister's advice to Her Majesty was unlawful, void and of no effect. This means that the order in Council to which it led was also unlawful, void and of no effect and should be quashed.
Strongly disagree with this decision of the Supreme Court. I have utmost respect for our judiciary. I don't think this was the right decision. I think that the prerogative of prorogation has been used for centuries without this kind of challenge. It's perfectly usual to have a Queen's speech. That's what we want to do.
Parliament has not been prorogued. This is the unanimous judgment of all 11 justices.
Here in Uxbridge today, Boris Johnson's constituency.
Don't you ever mention that name in front of me, that filthy piece of toe rag.
Boris, do you remember pledging £350 million to the NHS? Would you like to sign my rather large cheque? Why not?
Because you're doing a pointless stunt, that's why.
Do you remember pledging £350 million to the NHS? Do you remember doing that? Will you sign this cheque for me? Will you? What? Pretty, do you remember making this pledge that £350 million would go to the NHS?
Excuse us, thank you.
Mr. Smith, will you sign my cheque made out to the National Health Service? That £350 million you promised.
Very good, a little bit of a gimmick there.
So we could give an extra £350 million to the NHS.
Well, it's a matter of choice for governments. I do not have £350 million in my personal bank account, so I will not sign your cheque, and I'm not authorised to sign for Her Majesty's government.
Would you like to see it go to the NHS?
I would like to see it spent on the priorities of this country.
Do you want to sign my cheque? No one will sign my cheque.
You could just put one of the greatest cons ever played on the British public across it. It's a shocker. And we did say it wasn't true.